All right, so let's now cover CutTools. So to explain what CutTools do, let's just start with a cube and let's go to subdivision surface and let's add cube to a subdivision surface. I'm also going to increase the number of subdivisions here so that we get a clear result. All right, so what is happening here is that our cube under subdivision surface becomes a sphere. And to see here what is happening, we can actually display this with gorge shading with lines. With wireframe, we will see the number of divisions that we get from subdivision editor. But this is something that we don't want to see. I just want to see the edges from the cube. So we're going to go to display and enable isoforms. So that way we just see the edges from the cube. All right, so what is happening here is that this cube does not have enough edges or geometry to hold itself under subdivision. In order to correct that, we would need to add a specific amount of segments to bring our cube back to its original state. So I can now increase here the number of subdivisions till, let's say, 7. Until we slowly get our cubical shape back. What is happening is that these edges that are closer to the main structural cube shape, they are the ones that are shaping up our object, and all the edges here in between, they are the extra. To explain that even more, let's create this, let's make this cube editable object. And now if we go to move mode, I will just double click here with holding shift. These are the edges that are holding our cube. I'm just trying to select these. These are the edges that are holding our cube. And the other edges we do not need. And this is basically why we're going to use CutTools, simply to add these edges closer to the structural edge to maintain the shape, because not every single time we need to add division. So let's add another cube, and I'm going to make this cube editable. And let's now cover some couple of operations that we're going to use. First, I'm going to focus on the operations that we're going to use most often. And the one that we're going to use most often is going to be this one, loop path cuts. Also remember the hotkey, it's going to be very, very helpful in the future. With this tool, we can now do the same thing manually. We can just, you can also preview. This white line is going to be the preview where the future cut is going to be. So if you want to, we can now simply click here, here, and repeat the same thing that we just had, but with all these extra edges. And now, if I add cube to the subdivision surface, the result is the same, except we do not have that extra geometry. So this is how we're going to manipulate our CutTools. And to explain now this tool even more, let me just again reselect it and all right, so for some reason I didn't get the preview there. All right, so let's now talk about the tool. I'm going to hold shift to select each of these tabs here. So we can also start with the options. Now, you can use this tool by default. There's really not a lot here that we need to change because even by default, there's just enough options for us to work with. For example, let's now talk. So restrict selection, it's going to be that the cut is going to be restricted to a specific selection. So let's say that I have this edge and this edge selected, and I want to do loop path cut and restrict to selection. You will see that the cut will appear only where the edges were selected. So in some situations, really, we do not need that. When we want to create new edges, we want to create new edges all across the surface. So let's see what else. So basically, here you're going to have quantized steps, and I think by default, this is going to be set to 5. And this simply means that if we want to, let's say, create cut specifically into the middle or from a specific distance from the edge, we are going to use this quantized step. So for example, if you want to create a cut right in the middle, I'm going to hold shift, and then the cut will appear right in the middle of the face. This is also one of the most used features that we're gonna do. So creating cuts in the middle, and then we can use this quantized step to create more details or more cuts more precisely on the edge of the corners. If you want only the cut, let's say in the middle, we can put this to 1 and then you will always get that mid cut. In addition, what you can do is you can also play with the stop bar, which you can also move to any position you would like. So if we create, let's say, cut in the middle or even here, you can still move this by using the slider or simply just add more divisions if you would like. So this is one of the tools that we're going to use quite a lot. So even if we mention it now briefly, we are going to use it quite often. So if something comes up, we are also going to talk about some other features as well. All right, so let's now talk about some other tools that we're going to use a lot. And this is going to be the line cut tool. And basically the line cut tool is going to allow us to do cuts like similar cuts, but manually. So for example, if I want to create a cut like that, like we just had, I will need to do manual strokes like this. Now it does have a couple of more options that we're going to talk about here. But for example, let's say we are in scale mode. Let's go to the polygon mode and I'm going to hold Control to create something like this. In some situations, you are going to be required to do some manual cuts. So for example, let's say that we want to create a cut like this. I'm just going to show you quickly how the tool works. So let's go to line cut and let's go to the edge mode. So you can do this from the point or from the edges. So it works exactly the same. If we want to start with a point, let's say we create a cut here. So you just need to simply click once, click twice, and this is how you create your manual cuts. If you would like to have a straight line or line that goes under 45 degrees, which can be set right here, you can just hold Shift, create a cut, and connect. And once you're done, simply hit Escape. So I'm just gonna do quick and dirty cuts here, Escape to confirm, click here, Escape to confirm. So it's pretty fast. One additional feature to this tool is that you're able to do cuts like this as well. So you'll see that this cut will go almost all across the surface, and maybe by default visible only will be off. So that simply means that you will be able to do the cuts only to the faces that are visible to the camera. So you'll see that it's not going all the way through. So in many situations you do want to have this off, because once we do let's say cuts, we are going to do in this manner where we actually do need a cut all across the surface if we want to, let's say, split these two parts. Now you can also here go to slice mode, where you can cut, split, remove part A and part B. So cut and split are very much similar. So we can also show part A and part B, but there's also a very similar tool to this that we can actually mention now. So let me just undo here a couple of steps. And this tool is going to be a plane cut tool. So this is a tool that we are not going to use really that much. So in terms of modeling, it's nice that it's there, but in many situations, we are just going to use these two. And now what plane cut does is, let me just try to reset this to the default. I think that this was the default more or less. So basically what it does, it's very similar to what we had. Let me just see. Yeah, it's very similar to loop path cut and knife tool. So basically kind of combination of two, but with some restrictions. So for example, if we would like to do a loop path cuts, you will see that it's similar to what we talked about, but in this case, it has restriction to a specific plane, which is X and Y. So you can see we can create cut only on this plane. If I want to create cut here, I would need to change my plane orientation to create cut, or here, then again, I would need to create the plane orientation to X and Z, which can be found here. So this is X and Z plane, and then we would get a cut here. So this is useful in a way. For example, we are now in plane mode local, and local and world initially do not show much difference. So you can see that they do pretty much the same thing. Where you will notice the difference is if we take this object and rotate it slightly in any direction. So let's say something like this. And let's now try to do the same cut. So you'll see that world will behave very differently. It will try to create a cut that it's almost straight to the world that it's positioned. Okay, so here we can see it better. So it's basically the cut is based on the world axes, which is X and Y. So you can see here, X and Y is basically the straight line. So that's why we get that. If this would be set to local, it will be based on where the object is. So now you can see here, it's based on the object location. It's no longer based on the world location, it's based on the object location. So that is the difference between the two. And the camera, finally, it's going to be based on where the camera is. So if we check X and Y, it's going to look something like this. So again, pretty cool tool, some interesting features, but for us, we are going to stick with these tools that I mentioned at the very beginning. And similar to knife tool, you can also do cuts like this. So again, it gives you more or less the same result as what we've seen before, except what it's interesting here, if you want to create a cut, you can still manipulate this cut. As you can see, that you get this manipulator and you can actually move, rotate, and reposition. So that is definitely interesting feature. All right, so what else I want to talk about here is that we have the split, remove A and remove B. So basically, if we go to, let's say, remove part A, you will see that one part of it will be removed on the left, and if you go to remove part B, it will be the part on the right. So also interesting feature if you want to immediately cut part of the object so that you don't have to delete it later. So yeah, I think that this is more or less just a quick intro to CutTools. Now there's many more options here. Some of them are very self-explanatory, but as we work on our projects, and if necessary, we are going to introduce some other options. But for now, we're just going to stick to loop path cut. This is going to be our go-to tool in combination with line cut. Now there's also one other, which is called edge cut, and this is basically, again, very similar to loop path cut in terms that we can create, let's say, cuts like this or cuts like this. So let's also talk about that and see how it works. So basically, edge cut will do the same thing if you would have our loop path cut under restrict to selection. So for example, we do this and it's restricted to selection. It's going to do the same thing. So if we select the two, go to edge cut, and let me just see, reset the values. If I click once, hit escape, this is going to be our result. So basically the same thing. Same thing will work if we select now every single edge here. So let me just do that. And oops, let me just go back and let's go to edge cut. And now we're going to see here, we're going to have offset, scale, and subdivision. So if you want to play with an offset, you're going to need to set the offset first to get the cut where you want to. Or you can hold control, and while moving your mouse left and right, you can control where you would like to for this offset to happen. So let's say something like here, and then this will be confirmation. You can also do the same thing with subdivisions. So let's say we have, let me just reset this and add two subdivisions, and let's do the same thing now with the scale. So I'm gonna do a cut here. Actually, I wanted to select everything. All right, so let's repeat the same thing. So edge cut. So basically, while holding left mouse, also hold shift, and then you'll be able to play with the scale. And then we can, let's say, push these two edges like this and create these two cuts. So this is, again, something that might be useful, but we are not going to use it as much. So again, just click enter in this case to confirm, and there we are. All right, so I think that this should be enough information to get us at least comfortable enough with the cut tools, and that we just know the basics of what they do and how to behave. And then later, in more practical examples, if we need more information or if we need more options from the tools, we're going to cover that then. But yeah, so thank you very much for watching, and let's continue into the next video.